For devil's advocate, you don't need an opinion. You say the opposite to what everyone else is saying. It's not on you. It's not you. The devil. Just as you're leaving, just slide something under the fence like death comes to us all. Something like that. Not it's any of your business. I'm going to boil that spag. Use it to make a spaghetti carbonara and then refer to that out loud as a spag carb. Then I'll do a quick head count, see how many friends I've got left after that. Lead the way!
This is James Acaster. By a wide margin, he's one of my favorite stand-up comedians. In fact, his 4-part Netflix special, James Acaster Repertoire, was a huge inspiration for me as a storyteller. Acaster tells stories filled with nonsensical ideas, ranging from being an undercover cop named Pat Springleaf.
Needless to say, the boys at Scotland Yard don't much appreciate me telling you all this shit. I get in trouble all the time. The captain called me into his office the other day. Springleaf! Yeah, that's my real name.
To a revenge plot against a Pret a Manger employee.
In the meantime, I'm going to tell you a story. You need to know 2 things about me going into this story. I bear a lot of grudges, and I love French cuisine.
However, amidst this absurdity lies a deeper truth. Specifically, in this moment in the first episode of the special, Recognize.
When she kicked me out, she said, I love you, but I don't feel like I know you. I thought about what she'd said, and I thought about her, and I realised I don't not know who I was anymore. I don't know who she is either. That's messed up. She's my wife. I should know who she is, right? You ever get like that? You ever wake up in the night, you look at your partner who's asleep next to you, you study their face as they sleep and think, who are you? Well, I don't even know you. How'd you get in here?
In this episode, Acaster maintains the persona of Pat Springleaf, an undercover cop pretending to be the comedian James Acaster. Rather than telling stories about his own life, like other comedians, Acaster tells stories about events in Springleaf's life, the most prominent being his divorce. The atmosphere changes in the audience when Acaster shares the history of their relationship.
Perfect. I opened up a letter in my life. As the years went by, I dropped my guard more and more. And as soon as my guard was all the way down, she changed, overnight. Undercover copped me. I didn't like how it felt to be undercover copped. There's a point in every single undercover cop case. You watch the target get suspicious. They go crazy, they get paranoid, reading too much into every detail of every day. I got anxious, needy and insecure. And you might be thinking, oh, just be yourself, mate. Be yourself in a relationship. What if they don't like you, man? What if every relationship you've ever been in is just somebody slowly figuring out they didn't like you as much as they hoped they would?
The lack of absurdity in this portion of the show calls him to question his authenticity. It questions whether or not this authenticity is present earlier in the episode. This moment made me realize that somewhere hidden in his absurd stories and rants is a real pain. But is it his pain being twisted into comedy? Or is it his comedy being twisted into pain? Catherine E. Southwood explores the interconnectivity of comedy and pain. Applying this mentality towards Acaster's work, the structure of Acaster's work changed. Acaster uses the narrative device of the unreliable narrator to act as a reflection of himself. Springleaf becomes Acaster. Springleaf's pain becomes Acaster's pain. In leaning into the Springleaf persona, Acaster leans into the absurdity of the premise. His deadpan delivery of absurd claims makes Springleaf seem larger than life, as if he were not to be taken seriously.
Let you know a secret, I originally did that bit with the gun, didn't go as well.
The audience is more comfortable to laugh at Springleaf's issues than Acaster's, because they feel less real. But once the persona is dropped, and the audience is forced to acknowledge Springleaf's issues as being Acaster's, the reality of the stories is called into question. In the fiction of Springleaf lies the reality of Acaster. Acaster questions the reality created by Springleaf.
It's the lowest point in my life. I felt pathetic. Look at me. I'm an undercover cop pretending to be a stand-up comedian. Anything lamer than that would be a stand-up comedian pretending to be an undercover cop. Imagine that loser. Imagine him going on stage night after night, claiming to a room full of people that is something that is clearly not. Not just for one joke, by the way, for a whole show.
Acaster calls out the purpose of Springleaf to be a canvas for him to project his own personal problems. It becomes painfully obvious what happened to Acaster recently. The divorce of Springleaf becomes a narrative stand-in for Acaster's own messy breakup. There's a narrative shift at this moment in the episode. Acaster is forced to face his own issues without a character to hide behind, and in this vulnerability, he is able to reach his own catharsis. This moment in the show reminded me of a moment in Homer's The Odyssey. In The Odyssey, Odysseus responds to King Alcinous, king of the Phaeacians, question regarding his identity. Up until this point, Odysseus has hidden behind an alias and concealed his identity in front of everyone. However, there reaches a point in which Odysseus' emotions and his pain gets the better of him, and his persona cracks. He hears a story recited by a poet about his cunning plot in the Trojan War involving a giant wooden horse. Upon hearing this story, he cries. This performance from the poet is what moves Odysseus and causes him to be aware of his emotions. He hears a tale of his own exploits and is forced to reconcile with all he has gone through. It's this moment that causes Alcinous to see through the persona Odysseus had presented and question its authenticity. Odysseus, now forced to drop the persona, must reveal his true identity to the king and the people. Though the memory increases my despair, first I will tell you my name, so we can be acquainted, and if I survive, you can be my guest in my distant home one day. I am Odysseus, Laertes' son. The story of the Odyssey most people are aware of is actually a story narrated by Odysseus to the Phaeacians. Odysseus is forced to perform his own tragedies and painful memories in front of a crowd of strangers, but it's this moment that allows him to go home. His story and vulnerability moves the king to give Odysseus a ship and crew to make it the rest of the way to Ithaca. But this moment also allows Odysseus to come home spiritually, putting to rest the pain and baggage he has been carrying for 20 years. Acaster also has his own cathartic moment.
It's about accepting yourself at the end of the day. You focus on her because it's easier. Thanks for coming. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all. See you another time. My name... James Acaster.
Like Odysseus, Acaster hides behind a disguise for a majority of his relationship with the audience. However, once he is forced to confront his own emotions, he is forced to abandon this disguise and become vulnerable. The act of introducing himself and acknowledging his identity is the first step towards real catharsis. On a side note, back in October, I had the opportunity to attend an event in collaboration with NYU and the Aquila Theater's Warrior Catharsis program called The Odyssey, a cathartic journey. The event was made up by a performance of The Odyssey by veterans who had served in combat and came home. I felt like the Phaeacians, an audience watching a performer, carrying the weight of trauma and pain and transforming it into entertainment.
What I always find the most valuable in doing this is the process of creating this with the other veterans. When we go through the text, we're going through the story, we're talking about things that kind of resonate with us, and inevitably stories from our service, from our past kind of come up through this. So when we leave our rehearsal together and we go home and we're looking at the text, I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking about those things that we talked about and kind of processing them. And there's a real power to speaking the words aloud too, right? When you hear yourself say them, and then when they're laced with that kind of meaning, it really just brings this vulnerability out.
What stood out most to me was their connection between performance and catharsis. The performers found a piece of themselves when reading and preparing to perform this text. It helped them with their own paths of recovery and healing, but most importantly, it was how their experiences shaped how they engaged with the text. When they were on stage, they were inhabiting the character of Odysseus, but behind their performance, was themselves. Anne Christina Pereira and Sarika Tiga studied the rising trend of stand-up comedians sharing their experiences with mental health, a trend they dubbed unhappy stand-up. They found that unhappy stand-up provides an audience a peep into the private lives of a stand-up comic, allowing the audience to empathize with the victim behind the facade of comedy. John Mulaney is a good example of the unhappy stand-up comedian. A lot of his most recent works revolve around his drug addiction and recovery, most notably in his special with Netflix, Baby J.
Getting to do this show and standing here, listen, I am grateful to everyone at my intervention. They intervened, they confronted me, and they totally saved my life. Now, okay, that's enough. Don't stand for them. Listen, they've been thanked.
Mulaney is very open and vulnerable about his struggles, which elicits empathy and a sense of pride. The audience cheers for his recovery. The connection between performer and audience deepens, and his willingness to be vocal about a darker period in his life only strengthens that parasocial relationship. However, is this vulnerability real, or is it also a facade? Pereira and Tiga points out that stand-up comedians put up a performative avatar on stage that hides their true feelings. They remain composed for the benefit of others. Even though Mulaney does become vulnerable in front of the audience, he still keeps up his persona of being charismatic and control-oriented. He is calm, cool, and collected. Acaster, however,
He's just a boy!
Is not. Around the 12-minute mark of Recognize, Acaster tells a story about an experience at Pret a Manger. Acaster chooses not to accept a free banana that is, as he puts it,
This pile of jet black bananas, just black as the night sky, just wobbling as well. There was no solids in those skins, just a pile on the counter. And I didn't want to...
and instead chooses to pay for a banana he wanted. Throughout this story, Acaster seems relatively composed until this moment.
Under her breath, she goes... He thinks he's too good for a free banana. Never before have I been so offended by something I 100% agree with. Yeah, I am too good for a free banana, actually. We all are, aren't we? If you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not, believe in yourself a little bit. It is a banana, it is a banana. You know when you're standing there holding a banana and someone's come up to you and gone, ooh, you're punching above your weight, aren't you? It's never happened. It's lucky to have you, if anything, that banana.
It's amusing to see Acaster on stage, seething with spite and anger, but the absurdity of the moment makes you question his stability as a narrator. There is a lack of sincerity in this story, and a lack of composure. It's hard to empathize with Acaster at this moment because he seems like a child, fervent and chaotic. If Mulaney was controlled and reflective of his experience, Acaster seems like he's still in the middle of working out his issues. That was how I felt when I first saw this special. But upon rewatching it, I noticed an interesting detail. The Pret a Manger employee very quickly becomes a stand-in for Acaster's former partner, tying this seemingly unrelated story to the larger themes of the episode.
How unnecessary. I don't know what I've done to offend this woman in the past, but she's laid a language loophole for me and I've fallen for it. Hook, line, and sinker.
The feeling of humiliation and frustration from the worker, who trapped him in a false sense of security, only to pull the rug out from under him, mirrors the tangent about Springleaf's wife.
Started questioning himself. Is it me overanalyzing who he was? Worried that he spends most of his time pretending to be someone that he's not. All over a woman who at the end of the day just didn't understand him. And yeah, it is quite petty to dwell on an offhand remark made by a Pret a Manger employee. Just because he doesn't know. He might not know who he is, but knows what he's too good for.
While the story itself seems absurd and fictitious, there's a layer of honesty and sincerity underneath. On a surface level, Acaster is absurd, but once the layers are peeled back, a web of interconnectivity is revealed between his stories and the larger themes of his work. Offstage, Acaster has been very vocal about his mental health journey. In an interview with the BBC, Acaster is candid about his process and personal connection between performance and his mental health. To Acaster, there is a connection between performance and self-recovery. The simple act of writing and performing a stand-up routine based on his thoughts and emotions forces him to acknowledge them. This therapeutic process can be traced throughout repertoire structure, seeing Acaster verbalize the issues in his life, although through a fictitious lens, and coming to a conclusion. One such example is in the third episode, Reset, where Acaster shares his insecurities regarding his career.
I was back at you. If you can't take heckles, you never should have got on stage in the first place, mate. And you were like, yeah.
The main story around Reset follows Acaster getting a new start in life following being put into witness protection.
I'm about to go into witness protection.
Like Recognize, there is a cathartic moment at the end of the show, but instead of projecting onto his character, Acaster projects his dilemma onto a random audience member.
All us do. I do. You do you. Even you, mate. You're a good guy. But even you, what's your name? Andrew. Even Andrew, man. You get home, don't you? You look at yourself in that kitchen mirror. You just think, oh, Christ. All those things I did. All those things I wish I'd done. And you wanted to go to Kenya, but at the same time, you're too scared. You think, I can't drop everything, take a leap of faith and go to Kenya. I'm not brave enough. Can't go to Kenya. So you thought, I'll put it on the back burner. I'll go to Kenya at some point, maybe a few years' time. In the meantime, you started doing stand-up. Just for a laugh, really. You thought, oh, can I do it? I'll see if I can do it or not. And the more gigs you got, the more gigs you got offered. And now it's like 10 years down the line. It wasn't the plan, but it's your job, isn't it, Andrew? You're doing it pretty much every night of the year. And for the most part, you love it. Best job you've ever had. But every now and again, and don't take this badly, but every now and again, when you're not playing to a lovely crowd in Notting Hill, oh, you die on your ass, don't you?
Acaster's insecurities over his career choices are verbalized almost candidly. The stress and pressure that has been eating at Acaster is acknowledged. He is filled with a feeling of unfulfillment. He is stuck in a job he isn't even sure he enjoys at this point. He is too afraid to take a leap into the unknown and reach for his dreams. The stage and audience gives Acaster a platform to share his thoughts and insecurities. It allows him to verbalize and acknowledge the issues that plague his life. He is able to recognize and call out the root of his issues and hold himself accountable for making the changes necessary in his life. His feelings of entrapment with his career comes from a fear of taking that risk towards his dreams. Acaster recognizes that if he can't embrace the unknown, he can't fully be happy.
I know I'm not helping by sulking. No, of course I'm not helping. I should be positive, focus on the future, what I've got to look forward to, you know?
In his most recent special, Heckler's Welcome, Acaster is thrown into the unknown. Acaster starts his special with a list of house rules that he must abide by throughout the show. Most of them pertain to the audience, encouraging them to heckle and interrupt him as much as they want, hence the name, Heckler's Welcome. But the last rule was what interested me the most in the process of writing this essay.
Even though he spent his entire career trying to meticulously control every single detail in every single show he's ever done, James Acaster has to accept whatever happens.
Heckler's Welcome, at its core, is a show about confrontation. On a surface level, Acaster is forced to confront hecklers during the special, but on a more deeper level, he is forced to confront them with the fact that he cannot control everything. Acaster abandons the personas, instead chooses to chronicle the years that were formative for him as a performer.
And that, it's important to note, was my first time ever in front of an audience.
This feels more in line with traditional stand-up comedians, like John Mulaney, but there's a layer of chaos still within the show. The stand-up is intercut with random cutaways of Acaster on the drums, doing yoga on stage, and whatever this is. But most importantly, Acaster is interrupted by the audience, who surround him, and are encouraged to interrupt the show as much as possible.
Come on, Kermit. Oh, man. Why did I wear this? You absolutely did me. I can't believe it. I thought this looked cool. But you're right, I do look like Kermit the Frog.
Despite having a lack of control throughout the show, Acaster seems to have a collected mentality going into it. He doesn't derail the show, nor does he go on a spite-fueled rampage like he did with the Pret-a-Manger worker. Instead, he responds in a more controlled and calm manner.
You have any idea how it feels to be toast? With a cameraman right up in there?
There seems to be a growth of maturity. It made me wonder how Acaster's introspective of himself shaped the fictional personas he created for repertoire. How has Acaster moved on to the next step of healing? It is one thing to identify and acknowledge the problems in your life, but it's a whole other thing to act upon this new introspection. In the same BBC interview as earlier, Acaster spoke out about his next steps after verbalizing his issues. I believe Heckler's Welcome is that second conversation. The show is a sort of exposure therapy for Acaster to deal with the unknown and confront a major obstacle in his pursuit of happiness within his career: the hecklers. The same hecklers that filled him with doubt in Reset are now welcomed and encouraged to participate. Acaster is forced to be more accepting of what he cannot control, but also in practice is training himself to better confront the uncontrollable, and as a result is able to take these steps towards the unorthodox and into the unknown. During my own stand-up career, I actually tried writing a stand-up routine similar to James Acaster repertoire. At the time, I didn't quite understand the components and complexity at hand in his work. It came off as insincere and awkward, but most importantly, it didn't come from a genuine place of reflection. I couldn't replicate his work because I couldn't replicate his life experiences. Looking at Acaster's previous works before the breakdown that inspired repertoire, you can see this awkward feeling.
Got one of those telesales phone calls, you know? One of those ones when they say, this call may be recorded for training purposes. Don't want to count my chickens, but went really well. So. Come on. I think they're going to use it.
I got one of those telesales phone calls today. You know those ones when they say, this call may be recorded for training purposes, and don't want to count my chickens, but it went really well, so I think they're going to use it.
The jokes are the same, but how he delivers them and how they pay off is vastly different. It is Acaster's pain that made repertoire special. It is the pain in our lives that can pave the way to special comedy. And in that comedy, the pain hurts just a little less. My name is Nathan Lee. Death comes for us all.